Hi, my name is Marijn Bal, and you're listening to Functional Tennis Podcast.
Welcome to the Functional Tennis Podcast. I'm Fabio Molly, your host. One of my goals when I launched the podcast was to speak to a tennis agent and find out all about their role and journey. It's taken 80 plus episodes, but today I speak to Marijn Bal, a vice president at IMG Tennis, who works with some of the world's best tennis players. It was worth the wait to learn all about his life and role, and I hope by the end of it, you have a better understanding of a sports agent's role and that it's not all about private jets, sponsor parties, and player boxes. Before we get started, a shout out to our podcast sponsors, Slinger Bag, the awesome portable ball machine. To get more info on the Slinger Bag, head over to slingerbag.com. I hope in the near future to have the founder on to tell us how he came up with the idea, did over $1 million on Kickstarter and grown it to be a household name in the world of tennis in a short space of time. Okay, let's cut over to Marijn. Hi Marijn, welcome to the Functional Tennis Podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
As I was telling you earlier, we've had over 80 episodes of Functional Tennis Podcast, and if anybody reads our intro notes, one of my goals was to have an agent on the show, and something that I haven't managed to do, and I'm delighted to have gone straight to the top here. So thank you very much. Maybe we can start off by saying, talk about the elephant in the room. Quarantine, how is life in Australia in your hotel room?
Thank you for asking. And first of all, I appreciate the kind words, and I'm privileged to be here. So it's nice to have a chat. Quarantine is good. It's challenging in one way, but in the other way, it's a good time to reflect. It's a good time to appreciate. It's a good time to understand that we're talking about the bigger picture here. So I think we're taking the positives out of it. It's not easy living 14 days in a hotel room with no windows and no fresh air and not being able to move around like we're used to. But I think we're coping with it pretty well, I at least. And I'm staying extremely busy. So the time is actually flying for me. I got to be honest with you.
So you're getting plenty of work done, plenty of deals done.
All of the above. That's correct. Obviously, dealing with the time zones quite a bit, with the States and with Europe and my IMG colleagues and my team, they're in various places in the world. So it's pretty much nonstop from the moment I wake up in the morning until I go to bed pretty late at night. And in between, obviously, making sure that all our clients are doing well and have the things that they need to get through the quarantine, for some of those that are like me stuck in the hard quarantine, unfortunately, and others that do have the privilege to go out every day and practice. So it's definitely keeping me busy. I made in the month of December, I started a list, and I was writing things down that I was planning to do during these 2 weeks, because I was thinking, I'll have a lot of time on my hands to, work on projects that I've been putting off for weeks or for months. And, I came with my notebook full of topics that I was going to work on. And I must say I've maybe crossed one off the list. It's just been every day managing and dealing with the situation we have at hand, but all in good form.
That's procrastination for you. You just can't get on top of it. They always slip away. Tell us exactly, first of all, what your role is in IMG.
Yeah, sure. I work for IMG Tennis. As you know, I'm one of the vice presidents in our tennis division. Been here for 13 years, and I'm a player agent, as they call it. So my sole responsibility is the day-to-day management and taking care of our tennis players, so to speak. So I'm an agent, by birth, I would like to say. It's what I eat, sleep, breathe, and do every day. So that's probably the short version of what we do, but we can get into that a little bit more detailed.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about how you got into it, but maybe a bit more background. So what I've in my head is, you say you're a player agent. What's the difference between a player agent and a player manager? Are they the same thing, or is there a different role?
Well, if you would go to the dictionary, both job descriptions or words have a slightly different meaning. A manager is more someone that is dealing with day-to-day planning and execution of things, where an agent is maybe more you refer to as a business-like modeled individual, someone that's just purely focusing on the business side of things. And the beauty of the job as a tennis agent is that we do both. We are both managers and agents, and we flip between the two probably 350 times a day, if not more. So we wear a lot of different hats, I would like to say, as a tennis agent.
Nice. And what players are you dealing with specifically in Australia?
So I have a big task on my hand. I have a number of IMG's top clients here that I work with under my umbrella, so to speak. With Petra Kvitova, Victoria Azarenka, Belinda Bencic on the women's side, and Casper Ruud on the men's side, Jordan Thompson as well. So it's keeping me on my toes and keeping me busy.
Is it just you managing them, or do you have a small team with you as well?
Well, unfortunately, at this Grand Slam, I'm the only one here. Obviously, the pandemic and the restrictions of travel to Australia, especially with the amount of people that are allowed to come into Australia, is very limited. So we at IMG made a conscious decision to travel very light, and actually, I was the only one going. So I'm taking care of, obviously, the greater group. The players I refer to are the ones that I personally manage on a day-to-day basis, but I'm obviously here to help, our entire IMG agent team and roster of clients with whatever they need. So, I have a few long weeks ahead of me with lots of work and helping each individual player out when they need something. But that's what I love to do. So it's all good.
It must be great to have access to these players, and you're part of their family, aren't you? Each one, which must be exciting. But tell me, what sort of requests would you handle on a day-to-day basis?
I can probably fill an hour of explaining to you the wide spectrum of requests that come your way. But are you referring specifically to here this week in Australian quarantine, or you're referring to on a general basis on a regular day?
Let's say a mixture of both of them. So let's say, what sort of requests are players having now in quarantine? So Azarenka or Casper Ruud, you don't have to obviously tell me just what you can say. And then let's say once the Grand Slam hits, what's a usual request during a Grand Slam week?
Well, we're obviously in a very unique situation this past week and the coming week still. We're dealing with a quarantine situation that's divided in two pieces, actually. So there's a modified quarantine that was originally planned for everyone that was coming here, where you would be allowed to go out of the room for 5 hours a day to go practice at Melbourne Park. So the quarantine period was somewhat manageable because the players still had the chance to practice and prepare themselves for the lead-in week and then the Australian Open. But unfortunately, as is well documented, there was 3 flights coming into Australia of the charters that Tennis Australia provided for the players that had multiple positive COVID-19 cases on board. And the health department in Australia deemed everyone on those flights as close contact, which by rule and by law requires everyone in that case that is labeled a close contact to quarantine for 14 days. So referring back to your question, I and we at IMG have the unfortunate situation that several of our clients are in the hard quarantine. So they are different from the ones that can practice for 5 hours a day. They have to stay in their room 24/7. So it's a far from ideal preparation for a Grand Slam, as you can imagine. But to Tennis Australia's credit, they're trying to do absolutely everything they can to make these players as comfortable as possible. So a large part of my day in the last week, and probably for the next several days as well, is really spending a lot of time, making sure the players have what they need, whether it's, an exercise bike or a treadmill or exercise equipment. And at the same time, I'm spending a lot of time with both tours and Tennis Australia, understanding and discussing and being informed of what the plans are moving forward. Obviously, there's great concern about players not being prepared enough, the unequal preparation that the one group has that is allowed to leave the room versus the other group that is not allowed to leave the room. So those are the things that keep me very, very busy. At the same time, I'm working with the greater IMG agent group, that's back home, to make sure that their clients are all have what they need. And obviously, even though I'm on the ground, I can't do anything because I can't leave my hotel room. It's obviously a little easier when you're here to get things done. So there's a lot of managing going on here, a little less agenting this week, so to speak, but that'll be equaled out probably once we all get out of here.
Are you the guy they complain to so all the time? Where's this? Where's that?
Well,
get me that.
Sometimes it's better that they complain to me than they complain to the organizers, who are doing an unbelievable job trying to make this event happen. And players are, they're professionals, so they understand their responsibility. So I wouldn't say they're complaining, but we try to work together as good as we can, and just to make sure they have everything they need.
You take the heat, and then let's say on a usual. So you've been covering. How long have you been covering Grand Slams now?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, I started IMG 13 years ago, and I think we can talk about that later on. I think you indicated that. So I've been coming to the Grand Slams, I think, for the past 11 years, maybe 12 years. Not right at the beginning when I started, but the Grand Slams are the 4 big markers of the year where a lot of our business is done. So in the normal pre-COVID world, you travel to the Grand Slam the week before it starts, and you're there to, conduct your business. This is the tournaments where, all the brands come, and the people that invest in tennis, and the tournament directors and the sponsors. So you're doing a lot of breakfast meetings. You're doing a lot of contract negotiations. You're doing a lot of relationship building. You're doing a lot of appearances with your clients for their sponsors. I think the misconception about agents is that, the outside world sometimes thinks we have a very cushy job where, we fly on private jets, we sit in business class, and then we get to enjoy tennis from the player box. And it couldn't be further from the truth. That sitting in the player box happens very seldom, only when we have the time to sit there, because the rest of the time we're not getting paid to sit in a player box. That doesn't bring the player anything either. We need to spend our time in the player lounge with the sponsors and with the tournament directors, and the ones that ultimately, are willing to invest in either your player or your event or your business. So that's the main reason we're here, to do business. And it's an exciting job. It's very demanding, especially the Grand Slam weeks. We get very little sleep because you're trying to maximize the time that you're here. And of course, when you're spending your day not in front of your computer, you're on site, you're in meetings, work continues to pile up. So you got to find a good balance for that.
Nice. And tell me, how does it work? I'm sure your players are much bigger time than my question here, but I'm an Irish guy. I get through qualies of Wimbledon, make first round. The Sun, or an Irish paper, a UK paper, wants to say, okay, he's going to be playing Federer first round, centre court. And the way they get these on the spot sponsorship deals, how do they work? If you're a player, you're probably ranked 200 in the world. You've never had this, issue before. You probably don't even have an agent. And how are those quick deals done?
Well, I think you're referring to if a lower ranked player would play a top player on a big court on a Showtime where you get some brand exposure. So there are several brands that are heavily invested in tennis and that like the exposure, and that take aim at the lower ranked player that has the availability to put like a logo on their shirt or a patch or a hat on the coach in the player box. So we know who they are. They know who we are. So, it's we find each other. And if that lower ranked player is looking for that opportunity, which most of the times they are, we try to match the seller with the buyer, so to speak. That's our job.
Obviously, it moves pretty quick, the transaction, and it's not heavily contract based, is it?
Yeah, I mean, these are very different types of deals than that we're dealing with most of the time, because these are all, we call them one-offs, which, for the bigger player and for the stars is not of interest. We we try to focus a lot on long-term partnerships and deals, so to speak. But for the lower-ranked player, for that young up-and-comer, it's a great way to build a relationship. It's a great way to earn some extra money. So if those opportunities exist, we surely will take advantage for and deliver it to the client.
Yeah, I was just always curious how they work because, you see the up and coming through, gets the break, playing a big name, and they've a few patches on their arm then. It's interesting. But speaking of sponsorship and the bigger deals, do your players come to you and say, I'd like to work with this brand, or do you suggest brands, or is it just sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's the other way?
It goes a little bit both ways. I think you referred a few minutes ago to the word family, and every agent is a little bit different. But those that know me know that I'm a very open and caring individual in general, and with every player that I work with, it's like family to me. They feel the same about that. So we know a lot about each other. We know how we think, we know how we feel. We go through the ups together, we go through the downs together, but we have a very close relationship and we have a very open relationship, so to speak. So we talk a lot about, brands and wishes. So how I like to do it with my players, I always like to say to my players, listen, if you are driving along the road or you're sitting on an airplane and reading in a magazine about a brand that you like, you got to tell me because I'm going to call that brand. It doesn't matter how long it's going to take me to get to the right person or get to the right person. I will find the right person at that brand and I will pitch you. And that doesn't always guarantee that it's going to be a success, but at least we got to try, right? And most of the time we're pretty successful when it comes to these things. And we're also somewhat, specific. It isn't like, we're calling 300 brands and we just see what sticks.
Yeah.
No, we try to build a strategy. We really try to think what matches with the player. And the second part of this is like, obviously I have my vision. I have an understanding and a goal and a vision where I want my player to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. And I try to build their portfolio with brands that I also believe are good fits. But ultimately, the player always has the last word, right? So again, the openness of the relationship and the openness of the conversation is really important. So that because then you can be very, very successful if you understand each other and you row in the right direction. So it's a two-way street, so to speak.
Nice. Yeah. And it helps if they're heavily invested in it because the brand would love that. I think it just works so much better rather than something being pushed on them.
Well, I always say to the brand and to my players, like, we are in this for the long run. Yes, we'll sign a contract, but, a contract is exactly what it is. If you try to live by every word of a contract with a sponsor, it's never going to last very long. But if you treat your sponsor like family, they will want to stick with you, for the long haul. And, that's always the goal and the kind of attitude we take into the partnerships.
Nice. And how has the last year or the last 10 months so been with sponsors and contracts where there's certain appearances which just aren't happening anymore?
Yeah, obviously, it's well documented that the last 12 months have been, tough for our industry and our business. But I think we at IMG have been pretty successful in what we've continued to do. I think we have gotten very creative working with our sponsors of our players and, trying to see how can we give benefit without doing the in-person appearance, but instead we'll do it online. Are there other types of things we can work on together, even that, are not in the contract and that you would normally not think about. So we're trying to get very creative. And we've even seen through this pandemic that there's still companies and brands that are willing to invest. And we've been successful with, some new partnerships for our clients. And it's been for sure a reinvention of how we do our business and where we do it. But, you have to adjust. If you don't, then, it's not going to turn out well for you or for the player and for the brand either. So everybody's trying to work together and make the best out of the situation we're in today.
And are ultimately brands in general deciding to spend less? So if you have a new player who's up and coming and you're trying to get deals from, do you find it is a lot harder or you're still working your magic?
I mean, I don't know if there's one right or wrong answer to that question. It just really depends on the situation. I would like to say that the majority of the brands that are interested in working with young players are continuing to do so. And it may not be at the same level that we're used to, but if there's the interest and if it's workable for everyone, then we're going to make it happen. So it just really depends who the brand is. It depends who the player is. It depends on, the timing. There's so many factors involved. It's really hard to give you one direct answer, yes or no, on that, so to speak. It's really depending on the situation and the player.
Yeah, I can see that there. Let's take it back a few years, 15, 16, 17 years. How did you get into sports agency? And before that, are you a tennis player?
Yes. The story how I got to where I am today, or where we stand today, it's actually quite a long one. And I could probably fill 2 lengths of your podcast with that. So I'll try to condense it in a 2-minute summary. But I'm 36 years old, actually. And I was born and raised in the Netherlands. Grew up there. I lived in Germany for 4 years when I was 7 years old because of my dad's job. And my dad did a lot of traveling for work. So I was really always interested in, places that my dad traveled to. And that's probably why I enjoy the travel and the tour as well, because I like to see the world. But I was a decent junior tennis player in Holland. I was nothing special. I'd never had any illusion that I was going to make it as a professional. But I was really interested in anything that had to do with tennis. I think when I was 12 years old, I could name from every player in the top 100 what racket and what clothing brand they played with. So I was really interested in all the assets that came off the tennis court. And when I was 17 years old in 2001, I spent a summer in Cleveland, Ohio, teaching tennis at a summer camp. And I happened to play tennis one night with a gentleman that I met that was actually a friend of the neighbors of the people I was staying with. I don't want to make it too complicated, but this is important for the story later on. And this gentleman worked for a company called IMG, and at the time I had no idea what IMG was. And IMG was at the time headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. So I spent that summer of 2001 in the United States teaching tennis at a summer camp, and some of the guys that were doing the same were all talking about college tennis. And I asked them, what's college tennis? Can you explain something to me about that? And they explained to me how the college tennis system works in the United States. And I was sold from there on. I was not good enough to become ever a professional, but I thought I could have the level to play college tennis. So after that summer, I was very focused to finish high school, which, I did 2 years later. And I was lucky enough to get a tennis scholarship. Had a bit of a journey, but ended up at Division II school and in Georgia. I tell you, when I started college in 2004, in the fall of 2004, I said to my parents, "Well, I'm gonna do this. This is my dream. I want to experience this for 6 months, and don't worry, I'll come home and January 1st, I'll start college in the Netherlands." Well, we're now almost 17 years later, and I have not fulfilled that promise to my mom. So
she's still waiting.
It worked out for the best. So yeah, still waiting. So 6 months of college tennis turned into 4 years. And in my senior year, I was really focusing on, what I wanted to do. I wanted to, work on the business side of tennis, but I was I was not trying to limit myself to just being an agent. I wrote letters to Nike, I wrote letters to Adidas, I wrote letters to every brand you can probably think of. And, then in the back of my mind, I obviously knew what IMG was, or what sports management was in tennis management. And then I realized that I had played 6 years before that in the summer of 2001 tennis with a guy that worked for IMG. So I sent him an email and I said, "You probably don't remember who I am, but we played tennis in 2001, and I'd love to learn more from you how I can ever set my foot in the door in this business." So I called him up, and he of course, he remembered me, and we had a great conversation, and he made an introduction. And 6 months later, when I graduated, I was lucky enough to get an unpaid summer internship at IMG Tennis, which was a dream come true for me. There was absolutely no guarantees for a job. It was an 8-week internship for a summer and no guarantees of nothing. So I packed my stuff. I actually drove to Bradenton, Florida, where my internship was going to be based, because IMG, owns the Bollettieri Academy there, and we had 2 agents based there. And I walked in the door there in early June, and I had 2 months to work and get experience and put it on my resume with no guarantees of anything. And I think I worked 19 or 20 hours a day during that summer, just trying to prove myself and do whatever I possibly could to, show that I was worthy enough to get a chance. And, on the last week of my internship, I was hoping to get a call every day, but nothing happened. So I walked into the office on a Friday afternoon at 5, saying my goodbyes, and they set me down in a chair, and they said, that they had a position open for an assistant, and if I was interested, and I said absolutely. It was like a dream come true. So there was I was an assistant at IMG, for multiple years, for 3-4 years to learn the business. And till today, I still believe that is the absolute best way to work in this industry and be successful as an agent, is to start as an assistant, start young. I was just turning 23 years old, getting out of college when I started as an assistant, and that's how you learn the business. You go through a cycle for a few years, and you build your relationships, and you get to understand how this world works. And after 3-4 years, they told me, now you go sign that next Federer, or go find the next Sharapova, and you start recruiting young players. And at the same time, you get some opportunities with pro players. And before you know it, it's 13 years later, and here you are. So it's been an incredible journey. I actually always tell some, I have some friends who I went to college with that, work on Wall Street and, have other jobs and office jobs, and they probably make a lot more money than I, but I always tell them that I don't feel like I'm working a day in my life. I wake up in the morning and I have more passion than the day before. And it's a privilege to work in this business and do what I do on a daily basis.
Well, it sounded like you've always wanted to be in tennis, which is great because, look, so many people don't know what they want to do. I know tennis players want to be tennis players, but outside of that, it's hard. A lot of people just don't know. But you sound like you want to work in tennis, and you figured out a way to work in tennis, which is amazing. What did you major in?
I was a double major in college. I have a marketing and sports management degree. I played college tennis, which was an incredible experience, and I owe everything I have today to just hitting against the yellow tennis ball. And those 4 years in college really matured me from a child or a teenager to a young man. And I was a double major because I wanted to make sure I had enough credentials on my resume that gives me the biggest chance to get an opportunity to work in the tennis business. So I double majored in this case.
Nice. And who were some of the early players that you worked with when you did your internship in IMG? Do you remember? Well, I'm sure you remember them. Any we know of?
Yeah. You'll know very well. Kei Nishikori was just, I think, 17 years old at the time and had just made that run at Delray Beach that spring. So when I rolled in and started as an assistant, I was working a lot on the Nishikori account. I was working a lot on the Sabine Lisicki account. I worked a ton with Vera Zvonareva and Jelena Jankovic at the time. I wasn't the responsible one, but I was working with their agents and being part of the team. And those were my earliest experiences with top players and how I just learned the business over the years.
There wasn't a kid called Lazar Kushvili, from Georgia. Do you remember him?
It was before my time. I know of Lazo. I've met him, but I think he had phased out of the tennis world a little bit by the time I started. But I definitely know who Lazo is, and we've met a few times.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. He's been in Dublin probably since then. And he worked in National Training Centre. He was a good guy. He gave it a go over here. And the tennis players. But he was, really good guy. Has a little kid now and still hits the ball so good. Yeah. He's good. So that's funny that you recognise the name. And with the likes of like Max Eisenbud, famous IMG agent, would he have been around IMG at the time?
Yes. Max was one of the agents in the company at the time. I was actually working as an assistant under Oliver van Lindonk, who is still a current IMG agent and one of my colleagues. And Max was at the time working out of Miami office, which he still does. Was the was the agent of Maria Sharapova and Lina, and very successful, as we all know. And after my first few years as an assistant, when I started to kind of become, a young agent, a junior agent, I would really spend a lot of time with Max on the road, and Max was very instrumental in my development. I looked up to him a lot, and he was kind of a mentor for me for many years, especially because I was starting to manage some top female clients, and obviously Max with his experience with Lina and Maria really taught me the business of women's tennis. When I was coming up, we were traveling to a lot of the same tournaments. We had some semi-final and final Grand Slam battles against each other with our clients. It was a fun road in those early years to understand the bigger vision and really shaped me who I am today.
Nice. So that's some good mentor you had. And how does male versus female player relationship differ?
Well, I mean, there's so many differences, but there are also so many similarities, right? They're all incredible athletes in the first place, and they're incredible human beings. They have they go through the same emotions, they go through the same ups, they go through the same downs. But every individual is different. I don't think you can just say the women are different in one way than the men. Every player is their own unique self and is their own unique individual, has their own traits and things they weigh and like. So I don't think you can classify it just between men and women. There's a big difference between everyone.
You just got to understand, obviously, spend time with the person, understand the person, and know what works for them. And each, whether you're male or female, you're unique.
Yeah, I think one of the main traits of a successful agent is that you have to have very good people skills. You got to be able to read, and you got to be understanding. You got to be able to become part of who they are, right? You got to be able to adapt and to step in their shoes and to walk in their footsteps or walk ahead of their footsteps sometimes, just to make sure you clear the path for them, right? And you gotta understand how to maneuver that. The people skill is a very important skill as an agent.
Yeah, no, I can see it's one of the main parts of the job. And how many years did you spend based at IMG?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as I said, I showed up in June of 2008 as an unpaid summer intern there in Bradenton, and I was in Bradenton for 11 years. Spent the first 11 years there, and then in March of 2019, I made a move out west to Los Angeles. I had an unbelievable 11 years in Bradenton. I learned absolutely everything I know today. I learned there, but it also had its limitations in a way that I was looking to grow in the business, and especially because as you probably well know, IMG is part of a greater company called WME, and within the WME company, we have WME Sports that oversees that IMG Tennis is part of, so to speak. And I was looking forward to learn more about our company and to grow myself as an individual by surrounding myself with people that I was looking up to and that I could really learn from, because ultimately that's gonna benefit my clients, right? So that was the business reason of moving. I also was looking forward to, I'm 36 years old, and I wanted to, experience a little bit of a different lifestyle than, the relaxed Florida retirement living, so to speak. And LA is obviously the polar opposite from what Bradenton, Florida was, but I was really looking for that new adventure, so to speak, and expand my horizon a little bit and give it a change. And it's been a great move.
I'd say those years in IMG really helped, use an agent. Obviously, with the players that the academy gets through there, it's a good place to scout. And speaking of junior players, what do you look for in a player? How do you find a player, first of all, that doesn't come through? So is it you or other members of your team are going to, I don't know, Les Petits As in France and checking out the players? Is that where it starts? Or do you have little people around the world who are calling you saying, no, check out this player, check out this player?
Well, all of the above. So we, in the early years as a young agent, you spend a lot of time recruiting and going to junior tournaments and all around the world. But I still do it today as well. A little bit less than I used to do in the past. I think one of the greatest privileges as an agent is that you can, if you start working with a client at a young age, which I've had the privilege to do with quite a few of my clients, you can walk with them through that journey, right? And you can really help them shape their future. And again, like I said, at least for myself, with all my clients, we're like family with each other. So when you start as an agent to do a lot of recruiting, I still do it. We have a great team. We all recruit. We are based all over the world. I think we have a great recruiting network. But to answer your question, what do you look for in a player? And this is obviously, there are so many factors, but I think the best metaphor I can give you for this is like, imagine, and I think everybody has had this experience when you go buy a house, right? You go look at 4 houses and you may not, when you see the house, you're just not convinced. Maybe. But you're ultimately going to settle on a house that you walk in, and the moment you walk in, like, this is my house. This is where I feel comfortable. This is where I want to live. And it's a little bit the same with a player when you're trying to recruit them. Not at all times, but you gotta understand what the potential is. You gotta understand where they're coming from, but you gotta understand who they are and what their support system is and what their support cast is. Because someone can be number 1 in the world when they're 14 years old, but if they don't have the right support system, or they don't have the right potential, like, it's great when they're 14, but ultimately we're trying to win Wimbledon here. We're not trying to be the best 14. So there's many factors involved. Obviously, there's a business side to it. Marketability. Where you're coming from. Do you have the potential to be in the top 10? There's all sorts of boxes you can tick, but ultimately it's a feeling. It's a feeling of walking in that house and saying, "That's the house I love. That's the house I want to buy."
It's a good feeling that obviously probably gets more refined and better for you every year. You know more, and you probably just know this kid has it, or has the potential to have it, and it's experience really. Yep. How has it changed from your early days to now? Like, well, I wouldn't say 100% accurate, but you just know that kid can go places.
Yeah, I mean, experience
compared back to when you first started, like 2 years into it. How's that feeling actually changed?
Well, when you start, you don't have anything to compare it to, right? Or you have no real experience where you can base it on. But I think it's very obvious when you see a young player, you can tell what their potential is and how good they are. You don't have to be a brain surgeon for that, right? And I think having a college tennis background, having competed at a decent level in Holland, or around the world, and when I was playing college tennis, I think you understand, you have a feeling, you're not going in blind. And I think the great thing about IMG is we have a lot of experienced agents in the business. And when I was young, I looked really up to their leadership. And how it has changed now is, I've been here for quite a long time, and we have a lot of younger agents that are going through the growth that I went to at the time. So I'm spending a lot of time mentoring them. I'm spending a lot of time helping them. I'm spending a lot of time being part of their process to try to assist them and to help them, so that when they go and recruit, that they know what they're looking for and they see what they're looking for. So it's experience. You go through this for many years, and it's I'm not going to say it becomes easier, but you understand it better, and it becomes more of it's part of what you do. So it's a natural thing.
Nice. And is there a certain attraction to players from different countries, more exotic countries, which maybe don't have, like, let's say, a top 100 player? Is it China doesn't have a top 100 player? Is there an advantage to getting a player that you think could have potential in the future from China, could become top 50? All of a sudden you have a superstar in China and everybody wins in that situation.
Of course.
Is that something you're actively looking for?
Of course. And, China is obviously where everybody is looking. But it's not only China. I mean, imagine India is a country of 1.1 billion people, right? I don't think you need to be top 10 in the world if you're from India to be, very successful as a tennis player off the tennis court. And, I think if you're 50 in the world and you're from India, that it's going to be paying a great dividends to everyone. So, we're obviously like everybody does, is looking for that. But it's not the only thing that we look for. I think if you have the potential to be a star, we will find you and you will find us. And we work with the stars. I think IMG's history over the last 50 years has shown that every major champion, over the last 50 years has been with IMG, and we're going to continue to do so. And we have the formula for it.
Nice. Yeah, nice. So let's move on. I don't have too many more questions here. A couple, 3 or 4 left here. But one is particularly with the rise, I'm sure you've answered questions of this before, but the rise of the smaller, more boutique agencies. So the likes of, I know, Andy Murray's 77 Management with Simon Fuller. I know the guys at Tenium, Team8. How much of a challenge has that made your job more recently?
Well, I think our landscape has obviously become more competitive. The one thing that I can tell you is that many of these smaller boutique agencies are, run or have people that have worked for IMG, have started IMG. There's been, several of these companies that you're mentioning. The people that are in charge used to be my colleagues. So yeah, the business has definitely become more competitive. There are more, so to say, smaller agencies or even just single individuals out there. I don't think it affects us as too much because, I think that our history has proven, and we proved that today, that the real stars, we have the infrastructure. Like I said, IMG is a very diverse company. We fall under the WME sports umbrella, and WME is a very big global entertainment agency, and we have all the assets that you're looking for as a global superstar under one umbrella. I think Naomi Osaka is maybe the perfect example. Naomi is American, is Japanese, but she lives in America. But she is a global athlete, and IMG having its arms all over the world. Stuart, who is my colleague and Naomi's agent, it's not only Stuart who is in charge of what she does. He has a whole team around the world that works with him and has the resources for Naomi to become, off the court who she is and who she wants to be. And I think that ultimately is going to determine how successful the player is, the infrastructure. So the boutique agency is for some a good option, but if you want to expand yourself and be a global superstar, you're needing that global footprint and that marketing arm and those salespeople that do, that spend day and night selling tennis. Like Li Na was a perfect example. Max, who you referred to earlier, managed Li Na for most of the successful part of her career. And Max Eisenbach is sitting in Miami. He doesn't speak Chinese. He goes to China, but we have a China office that was instrumental in the success of Li Na, and especially the endorsement space. So it wouldn't be the right thing to think that you as an agent by yourself can manage a global superstar without any help from the outside, or I mean with the outside, I mean from other people in the company. And when we have the global superstar that we work with, which we have many of, they get help from around the globe.
That makes total sense, that infrastructure and how you guys are after the big superstars. Naomi Osaka this week signed, I saw, a Workday deal, which is quite impressive. Workday, a great company. I have some friends who work for them, and I think in most countries they get awards that they're the best company to work for. So I think that's a great association for her. That's a good deal. Well done there.
Yeah, no, it's great to see, and I think they're having done an amazing job on Naomi's business, and she's going to continue to do so. And it's something that we're obviously very proud of. And she's the absolute perfect example of the global footprint that IMG and the WME Sports Network have that makes Naomi so successful, because she's thriving and will continue to do so.
Great. And do you work with any other sports, or just tennis?
No, I actually only work with tennis. So that's my livelihood. That's what I breathe, eat, sleep, and wake up with every day. Never say never to maybe expand, but at the moment I'm perfectly fine and happy with what I'm doing.
Nice. You haven't got involved in a draft day, in a first draft pick?
No, not at this point. But you never know what the future holds.
And final question: I'm not sure if people have read the book, but there's a great book I was recommended years ago, and it's What They Don't Teach You at Harvard by the IMG founder, Mark McCormick. Did you have to read that book when you started IMG?
No, I had read it already myself, and it's one of the most incredible books I've ever read. I'm actually, Mark had passed away a few years before I started IMG, and I'm actually, I wish I had a chance to meet Mark. I've obviously heard incredible stories about Mark. I've read all his work, and we have several senior agents in our division that have been there longer than I have, who had the privilege to work with Mark, and it's inspiring to listen to them. And I think he will always be an inspiration for all of us in this business for many years to come. That will probably never change.
Yeah, and many other businesses, because I know plenty of people who are not in any sort of sports business or agency business, and they've read the book. It's been recommended numerous times. Anybody who's interested in any sort of business should really read What They Don't Teach at Harvard. Really great book by Mark. And yeah, thank you very much, Marijn. Really enjoyed chatting to you. And yeah, that's it. If you ever need anything from us, let us know. We're here to help. We're here to chat to some of your players if you want, but hope the rest of quarantine goes well, and your guys, your team, your players get on great at the Aussie Open.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and keep up the great work that you're doing with functional tennis, and happy to assist, and wishing you all the best.
I hope you now have a better understanding of the agent's role. I definitely do. I really enjoyed that chat with Marijn, and I'm very envious of his job. I know it curtails a lot of hours traveling and dealing with issues and sorting out stuff, but it sounds like an unbelievable job, challenging job, and to have access to the players is amazing. So keep up the great work, Marijn. Before I end this episode, there's one thing I wanted to cover which just slipped away, and I'll just try get it across now, but it's only something I learned a few days ago. And it's that if a kid signs a contract with an agency, so the kid could be 10, 12, 13, even 17, they are deemed to be a professional athlete, which then makes them not eligible to gain a US tennis scholarship. It's just something to be aware of. I wasn't aware of it, and it's quite interesting because, as a 12-year-old, you could be signed to an agency and you're taking away your ability then to get a US scholarship further down the line. Who knows what's going to happen? So it's just something to consider, something to think about, and I thought it'd be right that you're made aware of this. But thanks again to Marijn for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I'll be back next week. Until then, hope you're busy watching tennis, and take care. Bye.